Hi everyone, it's Miriam with a Y. I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I'm living in a surreal world. So let's paint a fantasy world, but a good one, like where fairies might live. Yeah, let's do that. Now, since isopropyl alcohol is hard to get these days, for this painting, I'm not going to use isopropyl at all. When I want to lighten my colors, I'm going to use PIñATA cleanup solution to show you how wonderfully that works. I'll be using PIñATA inks as well, but the cleanup solution will work with any brand of ink that you have. Now, if you have Claro Extender, that works well too, and is actually best to use if you're going to be painting on a really slick surface like glass or a ceramic tile, because Claro has binder in it, which really helps for surfaces like that. But if you're painting on GRAFIX opaque white, like I'll be painting on, or Yupo, for example, those don't really need the binder that much. So the binder in the inks is sufficient. I chose the cleanup solution because I prefer the lower odor. I'll also need some paint brushes for this piece, something to hold my inks as I paint, and some masking fluid. In previous videos, I've told you I love these little silicone cups for holding inks as I paint because they're so stable and movable, and I've mentioned that I think the inks evaporate slower in these than they do in a palette, for example, because of the smaller opening that these little cups have. Well, I wanted to make sure that that was true, so I tested the theory with both isopropyl alcohol and cleanup solution, which is ethanol, another alcohol. The results were the same for both. Here you see some alcohol ink that I've pre-mixed with cleanup solution. 1 part ink, 10 parts cleanup solution. I'm putting 15 drops of that mix in the palette and 15 drops in the cup, and then speeding up the video so that we don't have to watch the ink dry for the full 12 minutes. Now, I got a little impatient after like 9 minutes, and I moved them to check on them. Not a professional scientific move on my part. I'd never make it as a lab tech, but you can already see the big difference. And after 12 minutes, the ink in the palette was completely dry, and there was still a lot left in the little cup. So, to minimize waste of alcohol or blending solution, cleanup solution, etc., these cups are even cooler than I thought. Like I said, for this painting, I'm working on GRAFIX opaque white craft plastic. I'm starting out by making myself a sketch of where I'd like everything, with the main focal point being a mushroom fairy house. To give it an environment, I add some smaller mushrooms, some stones, and to give it a sense of scale, I decided on adding a crocus, since that flower is pretty, bright, and pretty darn short. Just like our fairy house. Because my plan is to have this be a red-topped mushroom with the iconic white spots, I'm going to use masking fluid to protect the white of the paper. So I'm lightening this part of the sketch to, minimize the pencil marks. I could just wipe off the ink later on to make the white spots, but for all those dots, it would be a chore. Plus, the masking fluid is just fun to use, especially with this applicator bottle. All you have to do is make sure that the mask is dry before painting over it. As soon as I'm done using the applicator, I make sure to replace the cap tightly to prevent the nozzle from clogging for the next time I use it. With the mask dry, I've pulled out sapphire blue and cleanup solution. I want a light sky, so just 1 drop of ink and several drops of solution is the mix that I want. Now, before dunking my paintbrush in the mix, I wet it with solution. I'm doing that because a dry brush would suck up all the ink in that little cup, and it would also rise up into the ferrule or the metal part of the brush. In a world abundant with alcohol, we can use a whole bunch of it to clean a brush out later, but we're not being wasteful. We're using our solution for painting as much as possible. After painting in my sky, I can save what I have left in a little bottle, but since I'm going to need green next, I just add golden yellow until I have a green that I like, and add cleanup solution to lighten it as needed. After starting to put in some plant life, I kind of realized the green on the right was a bit dark, so I lightened it again by using my brush wet with solution again. I think this made for a better contrast for the leaves since I'm not using a bunch of different greens. Using a fine point detail brush is great for painting in things like grass and long leaves. They don't hold a lot of ink, and the quick flicking motion of painting this type of greenery kind of minimizes the chances for, the ink blooming too much or getting away from you. So I really like really fine point brushes for this kind of task. Since I'm done with the bigger brush for green ink, I can clean it off now by wiping it onto a rag. I'm using a piece of tissue here so that you can see how simple it is to do without a lot of alcohol, and you can see how the ink is coming off. Next, with some full strength and then eventually some thinned down shadow gray, I add color to the underside of the mushroom caps, for those ridges that mushrooms tend to have down there. And then once I've got some gray ink down, I use a wet fine point micro brush to wipe away some of the ink to make even paler gray lines so that they really look like ridges down there. And when I say wet, I mean wet with cleanup solution. For the larger mushroom, I'm using a thicker micro brush. Now you can also use an alcohol blender marker for this kind of task. They're really good for little touch-ups here and there also. Just wipe them off on a rag to discharge whatever ink they pick up. To finish off the bases of the mushrooms, I kind of just add a little sort of skirt-like detail that mushrooms sometimes have too. For the body of the house, well, you know what I mean. I added a drop of burro brown to the gray ink mix, and adding more gray again later lets me change the saturation of the color when I want to paint in some trim. I spent some time looking at the mushroom, and though I liked the color, it seemed a little uninteresting too. So I started to add spots. Now this was risky because if I didn't like them, I'd have to wipe it all off and recolor the house. But I went boldly ahead and I liked it more and more. That was a relief. I think it added texture and shading to the house. Let me know in the comments what you think of the spots. By the way, it's always totally okay if you have a different opinion than me. Next step, well, some stepping stones. And some other stones too. I added a little thinned pink to the mix to change up the color a bit again. After painting in the color, wetting the stones with little dabs of cleanup solution lets it create lovely textures for you, which is perfect for these pebbles and rocks. I just love that. It just kind of happens all by itself. I planted some more greenery, and then it was time for the red mushroom caps. For the small ones, I loaded chili pepper red straight from the bottle onto a micro brush. The micro brush can't hold a lot of ink, so it's super safe for small areas and much easier to control than a paintbrush for areas this small. I lightened the color on the right side of the caps to suggest that the sun is shining from the right. For the big cap, I wet my brush with cleanup solution and then with some red ink. Like for the small caps, I lightened the right side of the big cap too for a highlight. And also because I really wanted to give it more of an alcohol ink look. The cleanup solution is great for that. I apologize for having turned on the camera late here. For the crocus, I chose Passion Purple and the micro brush again, and I lightened it as needed. To finish off the house's colors, I gave the window a gray-green mix, and the door is mostly golden yellow with a hint of brown. I chose to make vertical passes with the micro brush to give the door the look of wood panels. A little shading on the house and the flower, and some quick hardware on the door with an ultra fine point Sharpie. And now it's time for the masking fluid reveal. One of my favorite parts. I'm using my fingernail for this because I don't want to rub oil from my fingers all over the place. Another option is to use a glove, but this was fun and easy. After adding yellow to the crocus center, the very last step, which is definitely optional, is using a colored pencil to shade under the spots. Since on a mushroom, these white dots are a little bit raised. I'm opting for a colored pencil now because, frankly, it's easy and totally safe. Because a colored pencil cannot reactivate your ink or bloom. So I do not want to mess this up now. I hope that you can grab some cleanup solution while they still have it in stock and continue having alcohol ink fun. I've linked the solution below in the description box for you in both bottle sizes, and I've linked to where the price is better than everywhere else. The silicone cups, though, I only found on Amazon. There's a link for them too. By the way, another advantage of the cups is they minimize the ink's odors since they have that smaller opening. Just a little added bonus. Tell me in the comments what you'll paint next. I hope you enjoyed this, and I ask that you share this as much as you can. It really can help my channel. Much love to you all. Stay healthy and safe, and absolutely, positively let your creative nature shine. See you soon. Bye now.